this lingering bitterness and hatred between the United States and Iran. So here's what I'm hoping and watching for. That the Iranians do not take another bite at the apple. I don't think they will, but watch the Arabian Gulf, watch our ships at sea. Number two.
Can I stop you there for an Admiral? Can I stop you on number one? Because you just said something that, again, for Americans that have not followed Iran as closely as you have since 1979, the thing that has always struck me, and I'm sure it struck you, yes, they've been the epicenter of terrorism since 1979. Yes, we consider them, for good reason, to be a terrorist regime who considers the United States and Israel an enemy. At the same time, like the old Soviet Union, they too have been conservative with a small c. They do not swing wildly like Al-Qaeda. They do not swing wildly like ISIS. There is a reason why this regime has survived since 1979. Is there not? And in part, it's because they know when to say when.
That's right. Another way to put it, Joe, is they have ideology, they have religion, they have goals, but they are not reckless, and they are definitely not suicidal. So watch what happens in the Arabian Gulf to see if they take another bite at the apple. I don't think they will. Watch cyber. That shoe has yet to drop. And let us hope that this will be a moment where someone can come in and maybe negotiate this. And I'll close by saying this is where the Europeans, who have been kind of on the fence in some ways, could step up. Look for someone like Ursula von der Leyen, the new head of the European Union, very capable former German defense minister. I know her well. She could lead an effort. We could get into mediation. I think this is a cautiously hopeful moment. We'll know a lot more as the day unfolds.
So let's get a sense of what we're hearing from the White House. Hans Nichols is there. There was some preparation for an address last night. It looks like it may take place this morning. What do we know, Hans?
Only echoes from the White House right now, right? We have some retweets. We have some idea of what Lindsey Graham thinks. And what's clear is that the president is preserving his ability to make a decision this morning. He looks like he slept on it. I would note that the lights are on in the residence upstairs. In the National Security Advisor's office in the West Wing, the lights are not on. Sometimes when we had crisis moments, you see all the lights on the West Wing this early in the morning. And the president is really caught between his rhetoric here, right? On the one hand, he's laid out this test that if any civilians or military members or assets are harmed, that will merit a response. That was the Saturday night message. But then he has this different message, and that is one of proportionality. And that's when he pulled back the strikes back in June when the Iranians downed that American drone. So the president's caught a little bit between his own rhetoric. We'll see which advisors he's listening to, because Lindsey Graham is talking about this being an act of war. And Lindsey Graham, as we know, was brought in very close at Mar-a-Lago to this entire strategy, the planning on all this. So if he's listening to Lindsey Graham's, that gives us an indication of one direction. If he's listening to those who are more dovish, or maybe even his own campaign rallies, then he may decide to de-escalate and take this signal from the Iranians as a time to reset and rethink this entire relationship.
Yeah, Senator Graham was on Fox News last night threatening Iran, looking into the camera and doing that. Courtney Kube, you cover the Pentagon. Let's get an update overnight, as we've been talking about these hopeful statistics that hopefully no Americans, no Iraqis were killed on either of the bases that were attacked last night by Iran. Do those numbers hold up overnight? And what is the damage assessment right now from the Pentagon?
So now that it's daytime there, we're expecting to get a better sense of exactly what was hit at both locations. So far, there are still no reports of any casualties. It's become very clear that the U.S. military wants the president to be the one to announce that. And that's why as soon as President Trump tweeted overnight that he would be speaking this morning, everything kind of shut down. I mean, they stopped talking to us, even giving us any kind of sense of what the latest was. But they should now know. For the past several hours, they've had a chance to look at the both locations in the daylight and get a sense of exactly what was hit. It's looking now like these were short-range ballistic missiles fired from western Iran. Iran has this capability. It's not a surprise. In fact, they've even been able to refine it just in recent years, some of these short-range ballistic missiles. A lot of people have been pointing to the Saudi Aramco attack as their ability to use guidance systems and more precision. But we've actually seen it in the fight against ISIS at least twice. In 2017 and 2018, they used these short-range ballistic missiles, fired them from western Iran into Syria with relatively good precision to take out locations and strike at ISIS. They have some newer short-range missiles that they've been able to perfect, in some cases removing, not to totally geek out here, but removing the tail fin, which gives them greater accuracy. That may be, according to some very early reporting that we're getting, that may be what we saw here. It also has the added ability of being able to be less detectable by the radar. But we know in this case that the U.S. military had been tracking and had been preparing for some kind of a launch. They were looking at something happening yesterday. Everyone was extremely at a heightened state of readiness at the Pentagon and in Iraq. The military officials that we were speaking to, they were expecting something to happen. And we know that the U.S. military at al-Assad had enough of a lead time that by the time the first barrage started coming in around 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, the U.S. troops there were hunkered down, they were in bunkers, and they were prepared for it, Willie.
You know, John Meacham, this is a sort of fog of war. Last night, it certainly felt like we were moving into that weather pattern where you have a fog of war that leads to incidents like the Bay of Tonkin incident. Tell me, what were your thoughts last night, and where do you see us this morning?
Well, at the risk of total self-parody, there were two narratives running through my head. There was August 1914, when a series of events took on their own momentum and led to cataclysm. And then there was October 1962, when what Arthur Schlesinger called the most dangerous hour in human history, when we came as close as arguably we ever did to nuclear Armageddon because of the issues in Cuba and the deployment of Soviet missiles there. In both those cases, the human factor was absolutely essential, and that remains true at this hour. One of the things we think about sometimes when we're talking about these things in the moment is, and Richard, I think, would appreciate this, and the Admiral, too, is in political life, presidents, national security teams aren't acting in a vacuum. Right, they're in the flow of time as well, and this is not simply a story. This is not simply a series of events that's about Iran in this particular moment. This is also about this president, this policy, such as it is, toward the Middle East. I'm fascinated to know what the president of Russia has been finding out, knowing, saying, thinking over the last 72, 96 hours. That's a hugely important question. And so there are these calculations that are going on that are really not simply about the next 5 minutes, but about everything that's unfolding. And this is a president who is under impeachment. This is a president who has a political base that is below 50%. And we can't separate those factors and his fundamental personality from what's unfolding now. Are we really dependent on the kindness of Iran? Are we really dependent on their capacity to be rational and proportionate? That's a risky proposition.
It is. Though, it is interesting you brought up Vladimir Putin, because when I said I suspected that the president spoke to a third party, Richard Haass, it would be hard to believe that Donald Trump would launch attacks into Iran without speaking first to Vladimir Putin, considering that he's deferred to the Russian president on Syria. He's deferred to the Russian president on removing troops from that area. He's deferred to the Russian president on Ukraine. He's deferred to the Russian president on most geopolitical questions that impacted the Russians. This would obviously lie at the heart of Vladimir Putin's interest, since Iran has long been seen by Putin as a client state of Russia. So John Meacham bringing up the Cuban Missile Crisis, I don't think is melodramatic. The stakes may not have been quite as high last night, but if things had gone badly last night, and again, they still can today, of course, as we're all saying, it could have led to catastrophic consequences.